Beblal, digital committee member of ILA, and I will be your host for the 40-something minutes comic. So ILA is the Luxembourg Institute of Directors. It aims to promote best practice in Luxembourg, and in the field of mainly in the field of corporate governance. In the context of the COVID-19 crisis, ILA has launched this online initiative to help boards identifying key topics and key topics to be thinking about. And today we want to dedicate a session to the digital transformation and mainly the strategy. And we are joined today by 3 experts, both very active in different ILA committees. So I want you to welcome with me Martin Dobbins. He's the founder and the CEO of Sage Advisory, with 30 years of international experience in the financial industry, and former CEO of a large US bank's European entity. He provides independent directorship and advisory service to asset management, financial services, and technology firms. He supports investment board, venture capital, and private equity firms in acquisition, due diligence, regulatory structuring, governance, and he is a member of the Elfi Digital FinTech Steering Committee, co-chair of the Cybersecurity Group and ILA Digital Committee. And he is recently the chairperson for the fund's DLT. Good morning, Martin. We have welcomed as well Arnold Spruit. He is a non-executive director since 2008, vice president of the Luxembourg Business Angel Network, and he is the chairman of www.governance.com. Good morning, Arnold. And my third invité will be Tiago Sampaio. He is a former vaccine researcher, founder of a company called FIBO, offering CTO as services and data management in Finland, on the board of 3 consumer-focused companies, and leading the creation of biotech in Luxembourg to speed vaccine discovery via public data collection. Good morning, Tiago. So we will start our discussion by some slide. I want to introduce you just to share the same understanding. So maybe. Okay, everyone can see my screen? So digital transformation, just to remind everyone, is just a way to reimagine the solutions to existing challenges. So the way you are running your business and creating value for your customer and partners by making advantage of the new technology that pop up. So artificial intelligence, blockchain, Internet of Things, RPA, name it. It impacts the definition and the follow-up of your organization strategy, but it doesn't change the business model. It's about having a competitive advantage more than just a technology adoption. In front of that, we are also talking about disruption. And here it's mainly when the organization is engaged in a completely new business model allowed by the new technology that happens. So that's where we talk about platforms like Uber, Airbnb, and those kind of things. It allows as well a lot of partnership, but I don't want to dig into it too much. Before the pandemic, board directors were quite reluctant to adopt the digital area. It sounds too technical. The link with the strategy was not obvious. A typical question was, is it applicable to our sector? How fast can we move? Will our market suffer from disruptors? And these kind of things. And it sounds too risky. And even if a lot of directors start to consider to go in the digital transformation for their organization, it was not as fast as we can see since the crisis happened. I will stop sharing my screen and starting with the new question, with the first question, sorry. Maybe we can launch the first poll, guys. And in the meantime, I want to ask Martin to start with this question. So what was the position of your board, Martin, towards digital transformation before the crisis?
Oh, thank you, Najia. We, from the boards that I've been working with, whether they're funds or corporates, there's been all different levels of initiatives going on with digital transformation, tools from reporting for risk, compliance, board reporting, investment due diligence. We saw a lot of active engagement with fintechs in the industry. What we're seeing is that many of these firms working with their boards don't want to have to build something internally, but also to focus externally on who they can partner with. I'd say the other part that we've seen too is that with a number of the different boards working with, focusing on machine learning tools, blockchain type of app-based applications is something that people are focusing on right now, whether that's looking at data and how they analyze their data or how they're reporting data as well. So that, or in some cases, feeding into different products. So we do see initiatives happening at the board level, and we do see the boards are being actively engaged, being asked questions, and to support the management team.
Okay. Arnold, what was the position of your different boards?
Well, if I take my fund hat on, most of the boards were recipients of information from the custodian banks and other service providers here in Luxembourg on what they were trying to do over the last couple of years, the visions that they had, and how things were going to change in delivery of board packs, and so on, and how board meetings would be run. And there would be updates every quarter and not much progress, to be honest with you. As a recipient of of the promised digital transformation within such a bank, not much happened prior to COVID-19, or if there was progress, it was quite slow.
Okay. Tiago, you were engaged in this digital transformation before, so.
Yes, so for the consumer companies, we are already looking into the digital transformation, although the perspective was more like in terms of optimizing the current operations or the current product. As it now, after the crisis, we are more looking into maintaining the operations because everything got disrupted. But still, this whole process actually accelerated the digital transformation because it shows the need that's quite immediate for the consumer-faced companies at least, because the consumer is impacted and the whole process, the whole operation is actually impacted.
Okay, so let us see maybe what our attendees have answered. 1 minute. Okay. So the results. So already we can see 27% of the attendees answered that they were planning to consider the digital transformation in their next strategy definition, and 32% were already engaged in a digital transformation. And something to comment on this?
That's good to see. There is actually some movement towards this direction. And yeah, of course, now I think the perspective is going to change. Most likely going to double this number of engaged in the digital transformation.
Okay, so question 2, if I may, I will ask you to answer to the second question. Can you launch the poll? Okay, so how do you see the role of digital with regards to COVID-19? So COVID-19 crisis shows us that digital was quite important. My question to Arnold first: how does the COVID impact the strategy of your boards? Arnold?
As a fund director, COVID, the main impact and the initial impact was how do we carry on with business as usual with the tools available, and quite a lot of people found themselves with inadequate tools, despite the previous year's initiatives. So the way that boards have been conducted online using platforms such as Zoom or Microsoft and so on, that's changed. The way that documents have been signed, again, all this is in the fund space. And recently, this is now AGM season almost, and ILA, for example, has done a very full-on digital AGM using a quite good tool. So the board and its interaction with each other and its shareholders is getting quite digital. So the front end is certainly at the board directors quite digital now, but necessitated by the change forced upon us by COVID-19.
Okay, so it was more the board which become digital. Yes,
more the way it receives information, the way it's conceived using board pack software, and so on. So that was the main change that happened very early on. But yeah, a lot of it to do with online interaction, obviously, rather than the physical interaction.
Okay. For you, Martin, you very well understood during this pandemic, you even managed to launch new businesses?
Yes. I think what was very interesting about launching these new businesses and working with the other boards was that we found just the resiliency of the management team and of the management and their teams. We saw leaders at all different levels of the organizations, and I think as a board member, that really gave us confidence how people were leading through this the crisis here. And as we took that to the next level, yes, two firms that I support were launched over the last 6 weeks. And, working with their teams, to Arnold's point, we were using a lot of the same tools, whether it was for e-signatures, video conferencing. What we did see, interestingly enough, with the video conferencing, many of the meetings we were having, we stopped having traditional conference calls and actually were going to video calls instead, having a more interactive approach, which I think in the past we would have defaulted to a conference call instead and a dial-in. And now we see people becoming more comfortable. And I think it also kind of makes the meetings more outgoing, more focused. And also what we saw here was every department was impacted by it, especially launching the new businesses, whether it was the finance department, legal, HR, working with the regulators, working with external counsel and auditors. We were all using these tools together to launch a business. So it was a very interesting way of launching a new business, not physically being in rooms, but we did show that through the use of the technology and people's willingness to look differently and how decisions were being made, it really showed a new normal of how we approached running businesses now.
Yeah, it's true. So it's this digital transformation is more, is at the level of the means that were allowed to be used during the crisis, but it's also, at the level of the strategy. And Tiago, sorry, I want to explore with you some samples from commercial organizations. Have they shift their full strategy during this COVID crisis?
Yes. The thing that I've seen impacting the most was actually most of the projects got delayed, so the whole operating plan has to be, rethinking. And also there's a huge shift between the long-term strategy of the companies to something more short-term, because now we are very uncertain of the developments and uncertain if our the products actually going to still work in the market for this period. So we have to shift into something more short-term. For example, one of the companies, they were relying a lot on having a human personnel to go to the client companies for providing services, but now this is not possible anymore. So they are investigating now how to do AI or automation to actually do this process online, or even just do the process online with a human. So now there is this push towards this, and also you need to come up with solutions that would fit in the short term right now, because the long term is still very uncertain. We still don't know what's going to happen in the upcoming months.
Yes, and about that, I want to share with you some explanation about this shift of paradigm that happens during the pandemic. So let me share with you my screen. Okay. Can you see my screen? Yeah. Okay, back to the... So what is happening now is that the traditional firms, have advantages like established brands, markets, know-how, customers, suppliers, organization, cash flow. But they also, have the legacy system, so old IT infrastructure. The processes and the capabilities are deeply embedded, and the decision-making culture to deliver profit. So focus on a profit, less on the customer and on the employees, for example. In front of that, the new digital business model means a fast-paced environment. So the idea is really to fail fast and deliver a new solution. There is a big agility in terms of decision-making. Really often the hierarchy is flat, and this is the move to some quick decisions. The cost is lower because they don't have this IT infrastructure from the past. Customers' employee experience is valued as much as the profit, and the benefit is the benefit from a network effect. Whereas so the boards will play a critical role in guiding firms towards successful transformation by improving the oversight of the risks and opportunities that those new technology will bring on the table. Sorry. Separating the hype from reality, and this is what you said, Tiago. They start to see how they will employ artificial intelligence, and the adaptation of the board composition to even thrive during the digital era, not only survive. So I will stop sharing my screen to come back to the discussion with you, Tiago. So a right balance now have to be found between, those usual 3-year, 5-year strategy where organizations are engaged in big migration maintenance of their legacy to address more quickly the digital transformation alternative. Do you want, have you seen some example of pausing some ongoing initiative to launch digital transformation instead?
Yeah, that's an interesting case because, digital transformation, everyone knew that was needed, but it was always an uncomfortable topic. And now we actually have this space to experiment and, try to transform something or create something new and take this risk. And actually most of the companies, instead of taking that transformation of their current business model, they're actually trying to create alternative one. So this would be the time that instead of, let's say, using a human, like I said, you could just use an AI or another technology to be a different product. You don't need to replace the one you have right now, because then you have the leverage of experimenting a new business model, a new product, and then if this one succeeds, after the crisis, you can just pull back both products, and you can have kind of like competing. We have like a benchmark, how much one was giving profit, and then you have something to measure it against. And now is actually the opportunity to take this risk and try to come up with new initiatives. And if your business was actually disrupted on what we had doing before, well, now you have 100% of your time to take this risk. Otherwise, you can. I don't actually advise pausing everything if it's still working, but you should consider these digital alternatives, right?
By for example, gathering data, start to gather data, clean data in order to enter more in the
absolutely. All the companies that have been gathering data all the time, and their excuse was just, we never had the time to focus on these, or the process is too big, too expensive, and so on. But now it's actually the time, because all this data that you have been gathering, you can actually learn about your customers and try to create a better product or automate certain aspects of it, so you can leverage and can have a better profit overall of the company.
Martin, preparing this chat, we were discussing about the fact that the directors must now maybe redefine the new normal by questioning the needs and take advantage of this time to launch the digital transformation.
I think we take this as spot on. I mean, the way we're looking at businesses now and how we operate, there's a lot of lessons learned during this crisis that we need to kind of go back and not lose focus on. Arnold mentioned some of the items around e-signatures. What we've also seen with many firms is that the paperless environment, managers can't download data at home. They can't download print off reports, but they're able to still do their work. So that the old days of questioning, how can we go paperless? I mean, what we've seen over the last several months, that it's proven to be working well is there. One of the areas that I would say that really probably came up was around business continuity. You couldn't relocate. We've always built our business continuity that we were physically going to relocate. And now the definition of business continuity has to be revisited, not just from a business standpoint, but I also think from a regulatory standpoint. I think what we've demonstrated over the industry over the last, say, several months here is that work at home is a definition of business continuity. We couldn't leave our homes, but, and we couldn't relocate, and we saw that this could work. So I do think we need to kind of revisit and step back and look at some of the old statements about e-signatures and paperless environment, but also look at some of the new areas. What's the definition of business continuity? How do we work? And I think with those, we're going to be questioning going forward, lessons learned to incorporate them as we go forward. It's really key, I think, at the end of the day.
Yeah. So re-questioning the mode of traveling, the co-working space, the way we were meeting, the business continuity. Arnold, I want to explore with you, what do we need to address to avoid coming back to the situation before the COVID? Because we can't really imagine that we will go back, to sign physically the document and these kind of things.
Well, there's two directions to travel at the moment that I'm experiencing. I mean, just last week I had one bank here say that after the crisis that we will go back to travel, physical meetings, paper board packs, and physical signings. And just to contrast what some of the others are doing, which is investing further into keeping and extending the benefits of the change that we've had over the last couple of months. It's been uncomfortable for some people to make these changes. That's certainly true. So going to what Marty was saying about those changes, and that some of it's been made to work. So certainly there had to be some investment into it and to make it work, that you could work from home. And once that investment was done, it does work. And there are savings to be had if the regulator allows us not to have BCP office space on a bronze, silver, or gold package deal. If we're allowed to work from home in a BCP situation for the regulated industries, that's going to be a very good saving, which they can then use for investing into digital. Mm-hmm. But at the same point in time, the regulated industries can only go so far forward as the fiscal and regulatory rules allow them to. So if we have to continue with working from home, how can people do that if they're not inside Luxembourg? There are certain internal rules which are stricter than the national rules around data secrecy and so on. So that's been difficult for some people to deal with employees across the border. There are fiscal impacts to the employees from working from home if they are not inside Luxembourg as well, if we just take a Luxembourg point of view. So there's a lot of catching up to do, not just within the company, but on the way that actors tell the company to behave. So regulators, law, and so on. So if these can move in the right direction and soon, and we have seen Luxembourg lawmakers move quickly, if they start thinking about the medium to long-term impacts, then we might see some more space for companies to grow digitally. Their processes and stick with the benefits that we've already achieved and keep them going. But certainly don't want to go back. That's what we should be encouraging.
That's true. So yes, you're right. It impacts the full we can say ecosystem fiscally, regulatory, technical impacts. I mean, almost everyone in the industry is impacted. I want to launch the last poll and ask the question to our attendees to identify, in fact, what are the main challenges their board is facing when it comes to digital transformation oversight. And in the meantime, I want to discuss with you, Tiago, first. What would be the first step when it comes to digital transformation oversight from a board perspective? What do the director have to put in place in order to look at this change?
Yeah, I see it as a first step, at least what I learned myself, is that you should establish a committee to analyze the legal issues of the transformation itself. So when talking about data, so you're going to do a data processing of what you already have gathered, you need to really understand how can you actually process the data, if there is any legal issues on that and so on. So if your company already has a legal advisor, that's great. So you can start from there, pull together the data science team and try to discuss what you can do from that. And another thing you should take on, you should observe the laws around this, the data, because it has been changing quite a lot during this COVID and so on. I see there is more opportunities of taking more risks or doing different things in different ways. But it might be that 1 year from now, these laws are going to really tighten up and become more strict, right? So now is actually the opportunity that you can start moving fast towards this direction. So you should start with the legal part and just put your whole team together to discuss this. Because now people actually want innovation. I've seen the employees being more open to find alternatives, because now now they're at home, they feel more comfortable and they feel more pain points as well.
Martin, at the level of the board, I mean, as you are defining the strategies, maybe one of the first steps is linked to the strategy. Which kind of problem do you want to solve?
I think Tiago made a good point about the data and about the law. I mean, if we look at the use of tools, a number of firms are using more of a cloud-based environment. Their transition into a home-based working environment, managing data, was more seamless than, say, others that were using a traditional environment. That's going to really, and we've had a lot of challenges around how we use the cloud in our environment. And I think we've got a good history and good demonstration right now to show how it's been essential to the way we seamlessly be able to go in and to work our environment. I think cybersecurity we've seen. Now, I think one of the concerns now is around phishing and data. Did something accidentally come in during this crisis by working at home and the different types of tools? So I think as a board member, we need to be asking the questions around how is data being managed? How is secure environments accessed from home? Have we gone back and revisited? I think as we look forward, we need to go back and say, okay, during this crisis, what areas did we have to fix, and were there accidental backdoors that we have to go back and revisit and make sure the data is still protected and in good shape? So this, I think as a board member, we have some oversight around the transformation, but also around the security of ensuring that data is protected, both from a firm and an investor situation, as well as from a legal and regulatory perspective. So those are going to be key. But we are transitioning. I think boards are transitioning toward that type of mindset more and more. I think cybersecurity was the first step toward that. I think we'll see around the cloud-based technology and how we're going to utilize that even more, but also how we access the data and what would really become, I think as everyone has already said, what is the new normal as far as even the board of how they work in overseeing data now and overseeing digital transformation, both from a legal standpoint, but also one thing we haven't talked about is the human side of it. How are people working? The definition of a business hour or business day now has changed. How do they shut off and turn on when they're working? What tools are they using? So there'll be a number of factors that come into play. So I think when we look at digital transformation, we take into consideration our legal department, our finance department, which has been traditional, but I think we also need to take into consideration our HR department, how people are going to be working and how they're educated on these tools and work together. And that's a board responsibility for the holistic view of it.
Thanks, Martin. Arnold, we were talking about, a full ecosystem that has to be, we can say, addressed. Does that mean that we have to be engaged in dialogue with the regulator, with the industry associations and these kind of things?
I think that's certainly a very good starting point. And don't forget, we're all in this together. It's not the finance industry of Luxembourg is working from home. Everybody's working from home where they can, or going into work in A and B shifts. And that includes, obviously, the regulator as well. So they're under exactly the same IT issues as any bank or regulated entity here. So they will have mandatory experience basically of what we're going through, and this may change their mindsets about how the industry can run today and in the future. If they want to go back to the past, then we are going to have our hands tied. But I think with this experience that they're undergoing as well, working from home, and dialogue with actors, ALFI, ILA, and so on, here in Luxembourg at least, then we could get to a point where I was saying that we do need some rules to change, where we can lock in the benefits of the current model and extend those. And Marty's quite right pointing out there are also some drawbacks from the way this works, because obviously there's a reduction in social interaction, which people quite like to have around the water cooler or in the kitchen over coffee. But the regulator is in the same boat as we are. So we're going to have, I think, very good conversations with the regulator. I think we can have very good conversations with tax authorities. But I think the regulator is the main place we need to be talking to. But also, we also need to look at ourselves. What do we need to learn? How do we need to learn to adapt ourselves to skill sets that we need as individuals or within our own boards? And how can we get to a place where the board is tech savvy? Because the board needs to be tech savvy. People may never have heard of Zoom until a couple of months ago, and now you need to know how to change your wallpaper on Zoom, or how to decorate behind you better on the other tools. So, but that's just a small thing. But there's tech savvy is going a lot further than this, and this tech competency also needs to be in the board, not just compliance know-how, legal know-how, and operations know-how. And the tech side of the business needs to be in the board, and that needs to be not just about servers in the building, cloud data, and a lot of the things that you mentioned at the start on the slides. They're coming into the finance industry, and some of it's coming in faster than maybe people anticipate from the new market entrants. And how can that be used to the advantage of my organisation? I think is the question.
Okay, so let us see the result of our survey. So the main challenges our attendees boards are facing as all of the above, mainly. So lack of common vocabulary, lack of collective individual technology knowledge, difficulty to wait and audit and innovation. So maybe we can share with them some takeaway.
It was good to see that people picked up on the collective individual technology knowledge. That's something I think, at an individual level, you can work on that yourself if you want to. Because there are people who have been learning new skills like making sourdough bread, but you can also turn that over to learning on MOOCs, on courses around tech, if you want to, if you're that way inclined. But the collective knowledge and the common vocabulary, I think if we understand that better between ourselves, then we can talk the same language and help catalyze change in the company.
Maybe Tiago or Martin, a word and the way to organize, for example, the working groups, the committees, when it comes to digital transformation in the board?
Oh, my advice is actually to use your own employees to teach the board, so we actually can get everyone closer, right? Because these are times that you need to also care about the employee satisfaction, and they need to feel included into the whole process. So you as a board, if you want to learn certain technology or certain knowledge, most likely there is someone inside the company that has this knowledge. So you can organize a group make a session online, you know, just discuss. At least it's going to be the starting point. Don't go after these courses, and you know, it's like the courses are really long term. You need something short term, and just try to get straight to the point.
Yeah, it's true. It's really when the appropriate technology tools or the appropriate solution will be, for example, chosen by the management team for dedicated implementation, then a proper training mechanism has to be put in place in order to train the board directors up to the speed to decide on the ongoing steps, we can say.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would say that, to Diego's point, I think some of my technology coaches were my 20-something children at the end of the day. Those are the ones that were telling me how I should be looking at certain applications and using the tools. And if I had a question, I would go to them versus trying to sign up for a course at times. But I think it's a complement of the two at the end of the day. I think one of the things that we saw on one of the boards was we were in the middle of an audit, traditional annual audit in the funds, and conducting an audit online and trying to exchange data and actually looking at files and things of that nature became an interesting one. You know, you could tell who had secure data tools, who didn't, how we had to address that, had to show things on screens versus actually exchanging of data. So really there was a whole, I think, to Arnold's point, within the industry, there was different specialty groups who just didn't have the tools. And I think that has to go back and revisit, because just as we talked about, even something as simple as doing a fund audit became a production. And there's enough data sitting out there today that why couldn't that have been done easier as a lessons learned from that one. I think it's an interesting piece of it at the end of the day. Okay.
Let's move to the next question. When we talk about oversight, those business transformation, that also means that we have to put in place the KPIs or agree on KPIs with the management to get the right view on what's going on. So first, I will ask Martin. You insist during the preparation on the need to improve the forward-looking visibility. About those new techs and their impacts.
Yeah, I think, you know, we've heard it already this morning, and that is the looking forward and taking our lessons learned. I think we really just cannot, you know, unintentionally go back to the way we were working. That's clearly for sure. I think we also saw that this type of impact on the business transformation, it goes across all of our departments. Not just working with operations and technology, but working, as we said earlier, with HR, risk compliance, and how that was working, but also our partners. Were our partners ready in firms I was working with? And how were they addressing some of these? And also how we were working with the regulators as well. So there was a couple of different areas that we're focused on how we want to look at business transformation and who we need to incorporate, and not just think of the product that we want to transform, but the process and the impact of it. And then I think one of the areas that we saw around guidelines was also focusing on things like we talked about monitoring and limiting of data. You know, if we're going to be having this environment of executing data, or, whether we're working at home or through our partners, through more of a digital environment, you know, how are we monitoring the files being downloaded? How are we monitoring who accessed those files, the secure connection? So there's going to be an awful lot in the transformation as we look at the life cycle and bring in and incorporate the full picture to ensure an efficiency. So we don't have an excuse to say, well, see, it didn't work because of this, because that's because we didn't think about it. So I think there's much more that we need to reflect on. And lastly, I would say is that the lessons learned from this too, as we look at the transformation, is that I think Tiago hit it perfectly. The knowledge that came about within many organizations, from junior managers, from staff, from other departments, was unbelievable, very creative. We tend to underappreciate the knowledge sitting in our own backyard, and we need to really take that to the next level and raise that up and not go back to the hierarchies of management and protocols that we're using, because clearly we'll lose the innovation as we look toward transformation.
Okay, thanks, Martin. Before to close the call, I mean, Tiago, can we dig into the frequency of reporting and the KPI themselves? I mean, because the point is that, as Martin said, the pace is faster. So, you know, talking about the strategy of an organization every 6 months may be something completely, I would say, dated now.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen the cases that, you know, usually the project size was usually taken 6 months, and now it's only taken 2 weeks, right? So it's like you see that the KPIs of overall of the most important one is development speed cycle. So this one actually got shortened and shortened. So you want projects that you're going to be finishing faster and do really small changes. Try to innovate for the customer, for the client, or even try to make a better operational excellence. So improve something for the employee, you know, make the employee something easier to make the job done easier. So you'd see this fast pacing coming, and you really need to be aware of this management that has to be much faster. And I would advise something bi-weekly meetings to keep on schedule and just provide everyone the support needed.
But and in terms of indicators, so not only the profit, not only the financial reporting, but maybe something more focused on also customer, employees experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Engagement now is going to be the #1 priority because we see cases that, you know, your product might not be, you know, as much used after the crisis because they might consider that's not necessary. So you really need to tackle these kind of issues. You need to be on top of the user engagement, try to increase that, retention, and so on.
Arnold, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, Tiago's right. There's a lot of, and Marty, about within the organization, there's so much knowledge that you can tap into, and you don't need to reach out externally to a consultant as such for some of this insight. But there are more people that you have access to that have knowledge, which are your customers and your suppliers. So if you're producing a product or a service, and I'm just taking my fun hat off here, your customers may or should be reacting to changes in their customers' needs and requirements, and you should be listening out for that, or proactively asking for that, so that you know, okay, well, my product needs to change, because that way I can meet their requirements to meet their own requirements. So there's a lot of knowledge that you can reach out to in your stakeholders, not just internally, and that needs dialogue and a lot of dialogue and a lot of touching bases with those people. So I think we should be, you know, put my fun hat back on again. We should be saying to the banks, this is great. We don't want to return back to the pen. Can we stick with Zoom meetings instead of conference calls? Where needed, can we stick to Zoom meetings instead of travel, which kills a lot of time, and so on. So there are things that we should be saying to people so that they get the idea. Going back to the previous business model, and COVID-19 is purely an interruption to what was BAU, is something that needs to go out. But what would hinder Tiago's good examples is a onboarding process of new vendors, new suppliers to you. Quite often that's quite a long process within a financial institution, and I don't think they're fit for purpose anymore in today's environment. Things are moving so fast. By the time you finish your vendor management process on a new supplier, a more agile competitor has already not only finished that process, but has deployed and is winning your clients because they have now the better service or product in the market. So I think a lot of things are going to have to change and cannot stay the way that it is. But that's rapid change almost everywhere. So this is a real challenge to the C-suite and the management to adapt to this environment and to this speed. I think that's going to be certainly something to watch out for. KPIs for the transformations, that's going to change as people gain experience. But certainly one of the things that I'm seeing as yardsticks is, you know, how many clicks does it take for humans to work on a process? And for example, in the new banks, you've got to open a bank account I think the worst bank had 127 clicks to open a bank account in the UK online. And the quickest bank was somewhere in the region of 50 plus or something, and someone may correct me, but I just remember that it was over 120 for one of the first entrants into the market. And that's something that you're going to look at internally and say, okay, our client onboarding process, how many clicks does it take my people to do? And it could be something similar. Now, how can I get that down to a much shorter process and make it easier for my people to process that? And therefore, you can start saving time straight away.
Yes, some good advice we can share with our attendees as well is the fact that, you know, a lot of data will be available at the level of the board now, because we are gathering more data, and we'll put them certainly in the same dashboard. So maybe we have to develop a kind of guidelines that will help management to identify the most pertinent pieces of information to share with the board. This will prevent two things. First of all, it will save time for the board members to attach importance to only the one which is they're working on. So maybe the number of click, if we are launching this strategy, is important, but then a few months later, once it's done, I don't know if the board wants to monitor this number of click. And the second thing is that there is a big trap for the boards because the line, the frontier between the management and the oversight will become blurry. So anyone want to add something on that?
I would add, you know, there's been an interesting point here, and that is, you know, we need to go back as board members to the management team and ask what went well during this process and what didn't, what were lessons learned. I mean, Arnold made a good point, procurement. You know, it's taken forever to bring a vendor on board. I mean, they go through a number of hoops to do this. But all of a sudden, if you look over this period of time, how quickly we were able to bring vendors on. Okay, so what actually worked well? And what do we have to eliminate? And, you know, not go back to the same protocol. Another example of that would just be around the business decision-making that we're doing, whether it was through the reporting of our partners and how we worked with them. What did we actually truly focus on during that add value to the way we were managing our business? What did we change in our tone and our conversations? I think the video conferencing is a perfect example. Why wait to fly to someone to have a discussion? I think you can actually increase the quality of your relationship with your clients and your partners simply by getting on more video calls and having discussions with them. Yes, I think we do have to balance it with actual people being there. But that should not always have to be 100%. I think it needs to be a balance of the two more and more. So there's a lot of areas where the board can be looking toward management and challenging what did we learn from this engagement, from this crisis, and how do we go back better and going forward. Procurement's a good example. The way we focused on our risk reporting, the way we worked with our employees is another example. We saw, like we said, an amazing amount of talent rise through this. Let's not lose that momentum. Let's encourage it and actually foster it, and it will actually help us as an organization.
That's a really good way to conclude our discussion. Tiago, Arnold, your last words?
Yeah, I want to enforce on that one. This is the time to jump into the innovation, take this risk, because now everyone let their guards down. So there is less bureaucracy. You can actually move faster onto this, and there's this hunger for, you know, improving processes. So now is the time to do it.
Arnold?
Yeah, don't slow it down by the board delving into absolutely everything. Have a clear split between what the management team is doing and what the board is doing, so that both groups know what their terms of engagement are with each other. Obviously, don't lose sight of the board's responsibilities. I'm not saying you just leave everything to management and come back in 3 months' time and 6 months and 9 months, but be clear about who's doing what, so there's no duplication and one is not slowing the other one down or hampered by the other one. So you want to encourage change at the board, please do. I don't think we can go back to the previous model. There's also climate change to think about and so on. So there's a lot of things that's going on out there. And this is a good opportunity to make some of the changes that we should be making. So don't waste the crisis.
Good. So at the ILA, so Thanks all for this timely and really insightful discussion. I think we had a valuable insight into how directors and boards can step up to their leadership roles in this challenging time. With the ILA, we will share. I mean, we have gathered the questions and we'll answer them in a different manner. The first one is on the 1st of July, there is a coffee chat around the vademecum, and it's a guide to navigate during crises, including some lessons learned, risk metrics, and how it will be changed now that the COVID is, we can say, almost finished. There is a webinar on the leading strategic corporate sustainability, which is coming. There is 3 dates. Check on the website, and this is mainly to address the climate emergency. Voilà. We welcome your questions and your feedback on our Google Forms, and please continue to check the COVID dedicated page on the ILA website. Thank you all, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.